Shalom, folks. Welcome to the Midrash portion of today's Reunion Roadmap. That's Barry Phillips, along with my esteemed co-host, David Jones. I trust you're well today, sir.
Shalom, brother. Yeah, doing all right.
David, I'm thinking this morning of something early on in my childhood. Goes back a long ways. When the uproar in the United States was the fact that children were not being allowed to pray in school, or the morning time of prayer. It was normally an organized time to pray before class in the mornings, and that was being done away with. The Madeline Murray O'Hare days. You remember those?
Yeah.
Yeah. The famous atheist of that day was on a rampage to get God out of school, in her estimation. So people were up in arms. They were furious about those situations. But we have since normalized that mindset to where no one is shocked that children do not start their day with prayer. We have other schools now that they don't want to say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. We have taken monuments depicting the 10 commands or 10 words off of courthouse properties. We have removed Yah from just about every element and recognized structure in this nation. Other nations have done as well. We have secularized ourselves to the place that now when we need him the most, it's like, where did he go? How did he get out of here and we not know it? In the book of Psalms, chapter 2, two verses, verse 2 and 3, the sovereigns of the earth take their stand, and the rulers take their counsel together against Yahweh and against his Messiah, and say, let us tear apart their bonds and throw away their ropes from us. They're moving Yah's authority and control over them. But verse number 4 then says, he who is sitting in the heavens laughs. Yahweh mocks at them. We are living in verses 2 and 3 but that's easy to recognize that that's the case. We not only have the secular governments moving Yah out and throwing off decency, proprieties, things that would have been unthinkable decades or generations ago is now just standard means of conduct. But David, my concern is not just about governments and human institutions. I'm thinking about the body of Messiah, where he is being invited to live in his authenticity. And we would prefer a different, more preferable, more amiable, more agreeable version of him. Do you think Yah is laughing not only at governments and nations that have tried to move him out, but also his own people who said, you need to go change your clothes and put on a different appearance before you come back in here?
Wow.
Kind of was threw a left-hand curve to you there, didn't I?
That's a way to come in and really make our own ideas and our own thoughts accountable to that. You know, we have plans and perceptions about how everything is supposed to be and how we feel things are supposed to go, how it's supposed to look, how it's supposed to act, and all of this, we have an idea about that. The problem comes into play is what happens when we have people who are just very simply turning to Yahweh and they don't know things about his word, but they genuinely love him. They genuinely want to know him. How do we treat each other and handle one another and do things with that? It's kind of interesting because we start off talking about the nations and the ways of the world and how the opposition to Yahweh. And you were reading from Psalm 2. And when you're talking about that, my thinking is, Tower of Babel. And, if people are united in anything, they can accomplish great things, no matter what it is. I mean, if we can just come up with the idea, I think given enough time and resources, man could do anything. But then we put on the other side of that as well in the story that, at the time of this recording, we're in the midst of Hanukkah, not getting into the debate of should we or should we not, observe. But if you read in the book of Maccabees, we find that the idea here, the Greeks were coming in, they were conquering the people, and they were simply telling people, guys, we need to be of one mind, one accord, one purpose. We need unity. We need to get along. We need to do all this. Of course, you're going to do that by surrendering your religion and surrendering your ideologies, and you're going to think according to mine. And that's how we're going to become united, because the world is saying in order to come into a place of unity, you have to do it this way. But when Yahweh is saying that the way that he wants us to think and act opposes the natural nature of mankind, the fallen nature of man, and opposes the ways of the world and the thinking of the world, because it's throughout history, but I think even more so now, we're getting to a point where man is calling good evil and evil good. And for us to look and to say, as at large, where is Yah in the midst of all these things that are happening? I think it is time for his people to see things a different way. It's not so much about what you look like or how it's about coming to a place of seeing he is Yah and what do we need to do to see his kingdom here. And that's more about how we treat one another and how we handle one another and how we establish unity in him, not unity by my own ideas, because we're always going to be at battle and at odds with one another in some way, shape, or form. So how do we reconcile that? To love God, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your might. And the second, to come to your neighbor as yourself. I think the biggest part of the relationship, first and foremost, is to not read a book by its cover. Because a book only tells us where a person has been, in that aspect of reading a person like a book. It only tells us where someone has been, not where they're at or where they're going. I recall the days when, thinking way back, travel with me through time back to when you were a teenager. And, I had the long hair, wearing the leather and the chains and the boots and the whole thing. If I were to walk into a church, which I occasionally did from time to time, if I were to walk into a church, it wasn't like, oh, hey, how are you doing? Come on in. We want to talk to you. It was, hey, Martha, do you know where the kids are? Hide them, I mean, who is this guy? Oh, you see that guy? Let's get security detail on that guy, kind of a thing. But yet in the midst of all that, all I was trying to do was to seek the Father, So when we're trying to seek him, could we put ourselves in a position where we're actually hindering somebody seeking him?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, whether we would like to admit it or not, we either inspire or discourage others from walking with Messiah. We would like to say, well, I'm in neutral, I'm a wallflower, my walk really doesn't make that much difference. Well, that in and of itself is a level of influence. You are influencing others to be passive in their walk. The psalm is saying that Yah is not impressed with those who stand against him, those who try to throw away his legitimacy and his authority. He laughs at them. David, currently, not just in the United States, the world over, we tend to Americanize everything through our culture and our worldview and our happenstance at the moment. Yah is the world over being considered and engaged with, in the midst of a people who are hurting in a lot of different ways. We tend to forget that in Europe with the COVID situation, lockdowns are fairly severe, and they have not fared very well. Other nations are under socialist or communist dictatorships, and the people are oppressed and limited. Um, they, as nations, have been taught there's no superpower, anything supernatural, anything. It's just human. You live and you die, and that's it. But even there, the spirit and the presence of Yah prevails, and people are engaging Him and finding Him. Yah laughs at the very things that you and I shaking our boots over. Um, it makes me question, okay, how well aware then are we? Here in America, we have churches everywhere, we have synagogues everywhere, we have Bibles galore. You can find some scriptural text anywhere you want to. My wife and I were in a place here called Ollie's that is a clearinghouse of overstock stuff or stuff that didn't sell somewhere else. And they have a whole section full of Bibles of every sort and imaginable. So the word of Yah it's available. You can find him anywhere. And people don't pay any attention to him. And Yah laughs. There's coming a day where we're all going to pay a great deal of attention to who he is. And the world is going to be overwhelmed with the knowledge of him.
You know,
Go ahead.
on those lines, you know, when and you were talking about different countries and things like that, when persecution comes, when turmoil and problems come, that's when you really get to find out what people really believe. And that's something that we should look at as well, because I mean the word that's used in for persecution in the scripture is related to being pressed. Well, the idea is when trials, tribulations, persecutions, all these things come, we need to press together, but the common tendency is to separate.
Isn't it though? People out of fear began to fight against the very ones that are trying to help them. It's kind of like trying to save a drowning person. They will drown you trying to save themselves. If they would just relax and trust, you could help them. But you can't. We're not going to drown Elohim. It's not going to work that way. Futile are man's efforts to throw off his authority, his power, his plan for the earth. I'm trying to put into words. We need that authority. We desperately need Yah to demonstrate his hand of authority in the earth. We may not like it very much, but I think man needs a wake-up call. Would you agree with that?
I do, and I think we're starting to get it. You know, when you you started off talking in this midrash about when we remove ourselves from Yahweh, and then we're like, wait a minute, what happened? Where are you? It brings to mind the scriptures when Yahweh says, you're going to go to the nations, you're going to forsake me, but from there you will return to me. You will seek me with all your heart. You will come back and you will obey. I think it's a cycle. I think it's something that we're not being self-sufficient because realizing Yah is the one that sustains us.
Sometimes we take his delay, strategic delay, as his apathy. Yah is not apathetic at all.
It's actually him extending his grace to us, giving us chances and opportunities.
We've run out of time. We appreciate your attention, and hopefully these ideas will stir up something within you. Shalom, David.
Shalom, brother.